Hi, I'm Whitney Espick, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Welcome, guys, to the MIT Faculty Forum. I'm Teresa Carr. I'm an independent health and science journalist, and I'm also an MIT alum. I had the great honor of participating as one of 10 fellows in the 9th Science Journalism program last year, and I'll be your moderator today. We welcome your questions during this chat. You can use the little Q&A bar down at the bottom to put your questions in anytime. If it's appropriate, I'll check in with Dr. Ford during the presentation, and otherwise I'll save it to the end and we'll have a time for him to answer your questions. If you're joining us via Zoom, you can see that feature I just talked about on your toolbar. And if on YouTube, you can add your questions to the comments field next to the stream. We also encourage you to tweet using hashtag MIT Better World, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. I'm delighted to introduce our featured presenter today, Eric Ford. Dr. Ford is a medical physicist and professor of radiation oncology in the University of Washington School of Medicine. He graduated course 8 in 1992 and went on to complete a PhD in astrophysics at Columbia University in 1997 under the guidance of Philip Corrett, who was class of '84. After completing a postdoc in astrophysics at the University of Amsterdam, he transitioned to the field of medical physics. As a postdoctoral fellow at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, he and his colleagues developed the technique of 4DCT. That's a technology whereby lung tumor motion can be visualized as a patient breathes, and it has allowed for new treatments of lung cancer. Dr. Ford has been on the faculty of Johns Hopkins University and the University of Washington in Seattle. He's board certified in therapy medical physics and serves on the board of directors for the American Association of Physicists in Medicine and in other leadership positions. It's my pleasure to turn it over to you, Dr. Ford.
Great, thanks, Teresa. I'm going to pull up the slides here and you'll be able to follow along. All right. Okay, great. So thanks for organizing this. It's really an honor to be here. I'm going to talk about a project that we've been involved in recently to try to deliver low-cost radiation therapy treatments in low and middle income countries. And I'm going to talk about the challenges surrounding that and some of the technology. I'm putting my email on here. So if you're interested in this, you'd like to discuss it further, please send me an email. I welcome that. This is something I'm very passionate about. So let me give you a bit of background. So this is the kind of technology that we're dealing with. This is a device to deliver radiation therapy. This is actually a linear accelerator treating a cancer patient. And so this accelerator accelerates electrons up to some tens of MeV, and those make photons, and then those can be delivered in a highly precise way to the patient. This is technology that's been developed basically since the 1950s, and it's evolved over time. These treatments are about half of all cancer patients get this type of therapy, and it's delivered often with curative intent. And so you may have encountered this yourself or with family or loved ones. And about 1 million people in the US get this type of therapy. And it's really a pillar of how we manage cancer now. One thing about it is it's very cost effective. And one of the reasons for that is that you can control very precisely where the radiation goes. And it's non-invasive. You can see we're not injecting the patient with anything or cutting or anything like that. And you can see this in this illustration. So we tell patients this is a CT scan. So it's kind of like if you were to slice it like a loaf of bread, and look at a slice through the patient. So this is what you're seeing here is in orange is the spinal cord, and then here's the mandible. And what you can see is that, and then this is this kind of outline here, this like gray orange thing is what we're trying to treat. That's the tumor volume. So, and these are the radiation doses. So you can see the radiation doses wrap around the tumor, and then it stays off the spinal cord, and it stays off the salivary gland, which is parotid gland, which is something that produces saliva. It's very important for diet and nutritional status. And if you over irradiate that, the patient's going to have serious toxicity that then has to be managed, and that's an extra expense to the healthcare system and a really big problem for the patient. So that's sort of the background of radiation therapy if you're not familiar with it, and that's the context that we're dealing with. So what we started looking at with this project is what happens in the global context. So in North America and in Europe, we have pretty good access to this type of care. If you have insurance in the US, the door is gonna be open. You can get high quality care. And one way to look at that is the number of machines, number of treatment units that are available for patients. And so this graph shows that in North America and Europe, but compare that to what you see in Africa, for example. And there's some countries that don't have any machines, so the access is completely closed. You'd have to either they're not going to be treated, or you would go somewhere else to be treated. It's an even bigger problem in Asia, actually, where the populations and disease is different. So another way to look at this is the number. So here's the number of machines. So roughly 4,000 treatment units in North America versus 300 here. Or you could look at it per population. So 54 machines per 5 million people versus 1.3 machines per 5 million people. So the disparity is really striking. And I think we could have a discussion about this in the context of low and middle income countries. But what's interesting is that if you look at the burden of disease, it's really shifting. So what used to be a really big problem, communicable diseases, is now being sort of outweighed by cancer presentation as people live longer and there's more control over infectious diseases. So if you look at the number of deaths worldwide, the number of deaths from cancer, and this is in low and middle income countries, the number of deaths from cancer is more than HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, all of those combined. And yet the spending towards cancer therapy is actually very, very small compared to those. So that's all shifting, and it's very much in flux right now as the disease changes. So given all that, we need to be able to deliver these types of therapies that are pretty complex and in a way that's feasible. So here you can see some of the complexity. This is like the computer control system that will control a delivery of radiation. You can see lots of moving parts. Here's the field that's open that we're treating through, and you see these little leaves are moving around and controlling where the dose is delivered. I'm skipping a lot of the technical parts. If any of you are more familiar with the technical end, we can talk about that as well. But here's another picture of this, these leaves all being controlled and moved during the treatment. And the control has to be at the millimeter level at least. Otherwise, you don't get that kind of dose distribution that I showed you that is beneficial for the patient. So to do that, there's a lot of resource requirements, right? You have to have a control system. You have to have staff that understand it. You have to have a quality assurance system that's very robust. And so that's actually, this discipline is one of the most complex in healthcare, actually. There are more people with PhDs in our field than in any other specialty of medicine by quite a bit. So yeah, it's very complex. Okay, so
Dr. Ford, I had a couple of questions come in about what you were just presenting, and it might be a good time to address them.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Bill was asking, are the low treatment rates due to the expense of
it's not the lack of diagnosis. There's definitely a need for this type of treatment. The like standard of care in where the resources are, patients would be treated at the stage that they're presented in these places. And so it's really the issue is access. And part of that is cost. And so what's interesting is if you look at the cost in North America and Europe, the biggest costs are with staffing. And then next below that would be the technology and infrastructure. In a low middle income country, staffing costs are very low, but the technology costs outweigh everything else because of kind of what I'm showing here. So yeah, the costs are a big deal. And a lot of it is capital startup costs, actually. There's that huge sort of, activation kind of bump that you have to get over.
And also, David was wondering, you showed a dose that was less than 100 GY.
Great.
Says he's familiar with doses in the tens of kilo GY for medical device sterilization.
Right.
And is the cancer going to respond to such low doses?
Yeah, so this is a very different dose regime than what you see in sterilization. In sterilization, you're trying to kill bacteria and viruses, and you have to go to a really, really high dose to completely sterilize. And yeah, so this is in the tens of gray range and not in the kilogray range. And the kilogray, this is about what the tissue in a patient can tolerate. And if we go above this, we'd like to go above this to sterilize the tumor, but we can't. It's just not tolerated. And so, and one of the ways, this is actually a good question, because one of the ways that you can get a better effect in a patient is we call fractionate, or you titrate out the radiation. So you give it, let's say, every day for a month or even more. And by doing that, the normal tissue is able to repair, and the cancer has a disrupted genome that is not able to repair as well. And so you get an advantage to that kind of fractionated treatment, and you're able to go to higher doses. But going up above these doses really not really possible for the patient. Having said that, these are doses that typically do irradiate most cancers. It's a complex question, obviously.
Thanks. We'll get to some more questions as you go through.
Great. Yeah, great questions. Okay, so this kind of is a little bit along the same lines. So I showed you this picture which is the idealized distribution that we want to deliver. And we can do that if we have the high precision, high technology type of approach that I showed. But if we don't have that, then we're a little bit more limited. We have to treat with open fields. We don't have as much control over where the dose goes. So the lower tech option would kind of be shown at the right here. This is a lot more achievable with less technology, but you can see here that the tumor on the posterior region is underdosed, so the control is definitely going to be affected back there. You won't get as much tumor control. The spinal cord is fine because we're sparing that. We don't, you want to definitely avoid, a toxicity like paralysis. But you'll see that the salivary gland gets a much higher dose on average than it does over here, and so that's going to cause problems for the diet of this patient. They're going to have a hard time eating. They're going to have a hard time maintaining their nutritional status. That's going to be a big problem. And so it's not, ultimately this patient is going to really struggle from this, even if they do get disease control, which they might not. So that's kind of the goal of this project really, is that we need a simple, very low cost delivery method, but coupled with that, we have to be able to deliver it with this high precision. So it's a pretty high bar to ask to try to do this, but I'm going to describe some ways that I think we can achieve it, and we are achieving it. And I think it's also, when I first started thinking about this project and talking with our collaborators, we have a collaboration in India that I'll describe in a minute. But when I talked to them, one of the questions is, would you use this in your own clinic? And if not, why not? And that's a really good question. Why should we? It's an ethical ethical dimensions and practical dimensions to that. And so this is what we're trying to do, is to deliver the quality of care that we would, find acceptable to treat people in our own clinics, our own family. So here's what we're doing. Let me describe some of the nuts and bolts of this. So we have this novel design where we're actually using plastic devices that are now being printed on high-speed 3D printers. The plastic itself is designed for each patient. So each patient has a particular shape of this kind of a field device. Actually, they have multiple of these, usually 7 to 9 such devices per patient. Now, the problem is, as you can imagine, the plastic doesn't attenuate the radiation very well, right? Because it's a low density material. This is high energy radiation up in the MeV range. So what we do is we have this plastic shell, but then we fill around it with tungsten, high density tungsten. And that actually gives us then what we need. So we have a high attenuation here where the tungsten is thicker, and lower attenuation here where it's thinner. And you can kind of design this to be exactly what you need for the modulation of the dose in the patient. And so then, what you have in the end is actually a device that's very simple. It's a physical device that you can actually test the physical shape of, rather than trying to test a temporal spatial movement of blades of tungsten in the beam, which I showed you. That's much harder. It's much easier to kind of test and verify a physical object. So that's a huge simplification. And then what happens is these devices get mounted around the patient, and they don't move. So the treatment head itself moves around the patient, and the devices stay in place. And so there's a lot of advantages to this. I guess we can talk about some of the more technical details, but basically the idea is, fewer moving parts, and it also enables like a simpler delivery technology around the edge. You actually don't even need a linear accelerator. You can use radioisotopes. So we've done some experiment and studies with this. Our grant started funding a year and a half ago, and so we've gotten some results out now. And so here's what we have in the clinic with the current devices, the more complicated ones that I showed you. This is a real treatment plan where the tumor regions are colorized here, and then the radiation doses are wrapping around the tumor. And again, you can see sparing of the cord, sparing of the parotid gland, and so you're maintaining the function that you want. Now, here's what you get if we do it with the device that we're proposing and we're designing. And so you'll see here, you get roughly the same kind of a dose distribution. It's a little bit inferior in some places if you look closely. It kind of spreads out back here a little bit, but clinically this is very much acceptable. This is a completely fine plan to treat with. And what's interesting here is what we noticed is the treatment time is actually much faster with this device versus what we have in the clinic today. And that's because they're compensators, they call them, that kind of shell with tungsten that uses dose very efficiently because the field is always sort of on. There's no closed regions of the field at any time. So this is a huge benefit because the throughput in these clinics is really an important issue. So in the clinic in New Delhi that I've been to now, essentially the lines are very long. The clinic is packed. The waiting list is a year or a year and a half for treatment, whereas here we'd want to get people on treatment in maybe a week or less. So this kind of thing of maintaining the throughput is really, really important. And it's a way we can go with this. So this is where we're going with this, and we have partners. We have a clinical partner site, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi, one of the premier centers in India, started when the country became independent in '48 by the first Prime Minister Nehru. And then we have a commercial partner in Bangalore, which is in the south and very important technology hub there. And these are some of our collaborators from the center there. So that's a commercial manufacturing. So this partnership has been one of the key things of this, which is kind of interesting for me. I've learned a lot about it, is that it's very important to be on site working in the environment where this is all going to be used and developed. And because issues come up and ideas come up that we wouldn't think of just, with being familiar with the technology that we're familiar with in our own clinics here. So this has been a really good collaboration. So let me shift gears a little bit. I don't know, Teresa, if there's like a burning question we could, or if you want to wait for the end, that's fine.
So we've got a couple of questions about the topics you were just on. We might want to look at those here. Micah wants to know, do most people still use MCNP globally despite the export control complications?
It's used. It's not used as much as, so this, okay, let me give some context for this question. So this is a question about Monte Carlo calculational simulation. So yeah, actually, this is interesting. I still remember my 1801 class. The professor was talking about Monte Carlo, and I really thought it was a joke. But I was like, why are they talking about gambling? But no, Monte Carlo is a way of simulating photon interactions, and you can simulate radiation dose deposition. And MCMP is one of the major Monte Carlo codes. It's export controlled because it can be used for nuclear weapons and other kind of applications. So there are tight controls over it. People are using it. It's used in the medical arena, but I would say that JAMP4, which is another Monte Carlo code, is more widely used. And also people have built sort of wrappers on top of JAMP4 so that it's easier to use and sort of make it more user-friendly. You can actually learn it to use it even in a couple of days, honestly. There's some other codes around too. There's EGGS NRC, which comes mostly out of Canada. That's widely used in the medical field, again, because they're sort of like user-friendly wrappers around it. We're using JAMP4 mostly. So, yeah.
So, and I've got a couple of questions about 3D printing. So one of them is, have you considered 3D printing the devices with metal powder-filled plastic filaments? And Pat wants to know, does each patient get a custom 3D printed compensator? And is it tungsten recyclable?
Yeah, each patient gets a custom compensator because it has to be designed for that specific plan. That's very important. It really doesn't work any other way. The tungsten is recyclable. So these are tungsten balls, and then it fills. There's a filling mechanism, so it fills that shape, and then it's dumped out and then filled again. So that's all sort of automated. Again, this is a really important thing that comes out of the partnership with our collaborators over there designing the engineering around this. In terms of metal printing on 3D, so we've looked at that. Actually, some of you on the call may be more expert at this, and I'd love to chat about this more. But the experts that we have talked to, it's been too slow to do this with a metal type of a printing, and also the issue of recyclability is a problem. Tungsten is actually very expensive. That's another issue. So you want to limit the amount of material that you're using, like in the machine. Yeah. So hopefully that addresses those questions. We can go on, and we'll have more time at the end. I kept this presentation short so that we could have good time for discussion. So this is another aspect that we're really looking at, which is the design at a more general level of things. And this is a book by Don Norman, which has been very influential in the field, and I found it very interesting to read. I would highly recommend it. The Design of Everyday Things, and the cover really gives you the whole message. You can imagine that if you were to design a teapot like this, you're essentially guaranteed to scald yourself by using this, right? So let's think about designing things in a different way so that they work more naturally and more easily. Putting knowledge into the world is how they call it. So I actually met Don Norman a couple years ago. He came back into working at UCSD. He's actually one of the pioneers, I would say, of this human factors engineering. There's a lot of responsibility for making the interfaces that we have on smartphones and many other things. He ran a research lab for many years around this. So I asked him, he's done all this work. Why hasn't he worked in healthcare? Because there's a real need for this. And he said, well, it's too hard. That problem is too hard. But actually now he's working on it, so maybe we'll see him resurface. Okay, so and this I think illustrates what we're dealing with and the kind of the complexity of this. This is some work that I did when I was at Hopkins, and we mapped out the steps that were needed to treat a patient in radiation oncology, coming from the time that they present to the clinic, all the way to the time that they're treated and finished. And all the technology that I showed in terms of delivery is basically one small little kind of action point down here at the bottom. But the whole flow of it is very complex. A lot of tasks that have to be done with high fidelity. If you did these tasks, if you did every one of them at 99.99% like fidelity, even at the end, of course, they all add up in some multiplicative way, and you really have to be much better than that. So when we look at this, we're really thinking about design and how to improve things, make it easier, less error prone. And it's a really important issue. I want to show you a couple pieces of data that underscore this. There's a report from the Institute of Medicine in 1999. This came out of a study from the Harvard system in terms of errors in medicine and what happens. And this is what they found. So some tens of thousands of people every year in the US die due to preventable errors. And what's even more sobering is that in the 20 years since this report has come out, what has been realized is that this number is too low, like much too low. And so this is actually what we believe we're dealing with now. This is a study from Johns Hopkins a couple of years ago, finding that the third leading cause of death in the United States is medical error. And that's shocking, frankly, but there is a lot of data behind this that actually in the field, people are coming to this consensus. It's even more of a problem in low and middle income countries. There's data on that as well. Not a lot of data, but data on that because of the complexity of what I was showing. It's just a very hard process to control. So yeah, I think I think we can do better. I'm trying to take some of the things that we learned at the Institute and try to move out. And I love the hashtag better world. What was the hashtag? We're supposed to tweet about it. I can't tweet because I'm talking.
It's MIT, hashtag MIT Better World.
MIT Better World. I love that. So this is the direction we're moving in. So yeah, I'd like to thank you for listening. We have time for questions. These are some of the students I work with, and this is my postdoc, Dola, and there's another postdoc coming in, and some of the students, Clarissa, Nick, and some other people, and there's our collaborators in India. This is a huge effort that's possible really with funding from the NCI, actually. All right, thank you very much.
So we have a few questions coming in. One question is from Oscar asking, could we do a trial of this in the US? And if you did that trial, how long would it take to have outcomes? And how large a sample size would you need for the research? And what ages would you cover?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. Okay, so we are planning a trial in India at the partner site that I showed. Our plan there is to accrue 350 patients over 2 years, starting a year and a half from now. And that'll be focused on head and neck cancer and gynecological cancer, roughly equally split between those two diseases, because that's where this technology is really incredibly useful. And also it's the diseases which present very prominently in India. It's very hard to run a trial that compares old technology to new technology anywhere, frankly, because you can imagine trying to randomize patients to an arm where you have low technology versus an arm where you have high technology is really not ethically tenable. You need to have equipoise in your trials. That means that there's a genuine uncertainty whether one arm of the trial is going to be better than the other. And when you know the answer, it's not really ethical to enroll people in a trial like that. And you can imagine it from a personal point of view, you would not want to enroll in a trial. So it's hard to do a head-to-head randomized trial. The way we're doing it is taking historical data on technology that's been used already and comparing that data to the new technique. And so that we can do, and we are doing. Could you do it in the U.S.? You could do a trial like that in the U.S. The problem is that we've left the older technology behind so long ago that it's very hard to compare now, because you're talking about going back, 10, 15 or more years to try to look at the equivalent technology, the older version of it. And so the data just becomes very, very hard to interpret, because management of disease has changed in those years, not just because of the therapies that we're delivering, but the presentation is different. You have different systemic agents being given to patients, different chemotherapies, different surgeries being done. So it's really very, very hard to do. So it's one of the reasons that these collaborations are great, because these health systems are in a different state than we are right now in the U.S. And we hope to get it to where we are.
Okay, so kind of on that same theme, we're talking about cost savings, and a couple of people kind of want to know a little bit more about the intricacies of the cost savings. So where is the cost savings coming from? And this is from Jay. Where's the cost saving coming from in this new methodology? And is it from the reduced expertise needed to design the molds versus program the machine? Or is it from the speed increase that allows more patients to be treated per machine, so the throughput? And just on that kind of same theme, Pat wants to know, what's the estimated cost of a current machine versus your proposed machines and process?
Yeah, it's okay. So all of those factors are at play here. I think the biggest cost savings is probably in the realm of the expertise and technology that's needed to make sure that the delivery is accurate. Because if you roll out with very high technology that's not simplified, there are many costs. That's going to probably double or maybe triple the cost of what you're trying to implement if you do it in a way that's really, highly responsible and safe and guarantees that the delivery is going to be correct. The cost becomes very huge, and actually it may not even be achievable, honestly, because you have if I look at some of the support staff that's needed, you need physicists in these clinics to maintain this. You just don't have the workforce. India has a population of about 1.3 billion people. It has about 350 clinics. Here in the US, we have a population of, 350 million, I think it is. And we have about 2,200 clinics, I think it is. So you can see the imbalance there. We have 8,000 medical physicists as members of the AAPM. In India, there's a couple hundred. So you can see that disparity. You just can't, it's very hard to ramp it up. So even if you had the resources, it's kind of prohibitive. So I think that's probably the main place where the savings come in. A high-tech machine, like I showed you, costs about $3 million or a little bit more. They last for about 10 years, but they're service contracts that are probably about the same cost. And you need to get an engineer on site if something breaks. Imagine you're in Nigeria, for example. They have only 2 service engineers on the continent. I'm talking about the African continent. So if a machine breaks, which they do once a month or so, then you have a problem. So that's another cost, which is also hard to scale. So Nigeria is a good example. There's 4 linear accelerators there, all of which are gathering dust because they can't provide service to them. So yeah, there's many dimensions of that. So, and we don't know exactly what the cost of the device will be at this point. I mean, it should be about a factor of 2 smaller than the devices I showed you. But again, I think the cost savings is going to be a lot more than that. So, yeah.
So another technical detail, how do you handle, it's from Andrew, how do you handle patient motion and breathing, especially when you're targeting lung tumors?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So so really what you do, the simplest way to do it is you build a margin around the tumor where you're treating so that you know that when the tumor moves, it stays within that margin. And there are ways to measure that. When Teresa mentioned at the beginning that 4D CT technology that we worked on at Memorial, that's one of the major ways of doing that right now. You can measure the motion in 3 dimensions on CT, and then you can make sure that you encapsulate that motion in your treatment volume. So the disadvantage of doing it that way is that you have to make a larger volume that you're treating, and so that moves your radiation out into normal tissue, which can increase the toxicities and limit how much you can escalate the dose. So it's kind of a trade-off between that. Another way to do it is there are actually devices that you can have a patient hold their breath and treat while the breath is held, but that's tricky, right? Because you need to have the breath has to be held and the tumor has to be at exactly the same place every time. That's quite hard to control in like the 3-dimensional space. But it can be done. Also, some patients who have lung cancer have a really hard time holding their breath because their lung function is compromised. So it's a little tricky to do. And there's another way you can do it where you can turn the machine on and off in sync with the breathing. That's another way to do it. But that's also quite hard to control in a way that's accurate. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a little hard to do. Also, another thing, this is getting kind of complicated, but the way those leaves moved around, if they get synchronized with the patient breathing, you can actually deliver a dose that you really don't intend to deliver. So that's another problem with this. The compensator actually is a little bit better that way because nothing's moving. It's always on, so nothing can get synchronized in time with the motion of the tumor. So that's actually a study that we're doing now to try to see what the advantages of that would be versus the moving leaves. So yeah, great question. Thanks.
So I want to zoom out a little bit and look kind of at some of the big picture questions. KJ wants to know, can you articulate the issues in Asia that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation? And I wanted to kind of piggyback on that a little bit and ask why you're focusing on cancer care in low and middle income countries when, there's other health concerns as well, like things like malaria. Why is this what you've chosen to zoom in on?
Yeah. So when I mentioned briefly about Asia. So the issue there is really the population growth and also just the numbers of people. It's so because of that and just the need there, even a small disparity actually gets magnified a lot. And so even though the access in Africa is much more variable, it's actually a bigger problem just because of the numbers, if you think about it that way. So that's why I mentioned that. And so why do we focus on cancer care? And I think, there's many answers to that. I think you just have to look at what people are suffering from and try to do what you can to address that. And that the answer to that is changing now. It's, it used to be that, 20 years ago, if you asked the question, it really would not make sense to focus on cancer. It would be arguably a waste of resources. But now that's no longer true. And we have to look look now and then also try to look ahead towards the future a little bit to see where we need to aim. And if you do that and you look at it, then yeah, cancer care actually is one of the big areas to focus on. It's not, you know, there's not one answer to this, of course. There's many dimensions that need to be addressed at once, probably. But again, if you look at the expenditures, there's the huge gap. I mean, what's spent on oncology is a minuscule amount compared to what's spent on infectious diseases, and so there's kind of a balance, I think, that's a little bit out of whack right now, and it's changing. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. And I mean, of course, also you work on what you're familiar with, and this is my area of expertise, so it's where I can contribute. So there's that aspect, but I think it all just sort of is aligned pretty well.
So thinking about cost concerns and what you were talking about earlier about staffing concerns, is this something that can be done remotely? Oscar asked, using new technology, new forms of communication or devices as a way of reducing the cost of implementation?
Parts of it can be, yeah. So the treatment itself, you have to be physically on site, obviously, because we're delivering, a dose into the patient. So, and because that has to be done over multiple days, it's actually pretty hard to distribute that. So you could imagine doing it a little bit more in a more centralized fashion if you could deliver the whole dose in 1 day or 5 days. And in some cases, you can do that. And then that, in those contexts, it does make sense to centralize it. But most of the therapies we're talking about, they have to be delivered every day for a month or even more. And so it's hard to kind of centralize that and scale it up in that way. So that's the delivery end of it. But the part that can be distributed is all the upfront part of it. So I showed you that map of the complex process that we go through. Most of that is virtual work. It's mostly done on the computer. Treatment planning of the dose, the calculation of the dose, the outlining of the tumor by an expert, bringing in different image studies, reviewing of the plan by experts, the quality assurance parts of the plan to make sure it's okay to treat. All that stuff, in theory, can be done remotely. And actually, interestingly, this NCI grant that funds this is also funding another project at MD Anderson Cancer Center, which does just that, to do remote treatment planning of all this work that can be done in an automated fashion. So we're actually linking these two projects together now, which I'm very excited about. We're actually going to have a postdoc researcher who's going to be on site at MD Anderson working on this project that I talk about, but with the PI group down there to do the remote planning part of this. So it's very exciting because that's actually one of the big areas, a big need, because like I said, the expertise is very hard to scale up. So yeah, I think we're starting to see some of this distributed more, and probably we'll see more of that in the future. You hear about it a lot at meetings, actually.
Yeah, it's a really cool partnership. I have one more technical question from Micah, and forgive me because I'm not quite technical enough to understand it. But anyway, I'm gonna tell you what he said. With not having a collimator after the tungsten attenuator, is the dispersion due to tungsten scattering a serious limitation to the precision?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. You can imagine this as you move the collimating device up closer to where the radiation comes from. There's sort of a penumbra effect that happens, and the radiation gets blurred out. So if you imagine if you put the collimator like right on the patient, right, you would have a very sharp edge, right? Because you're close and there's no kind of blurring of the source as you look back. And so he's exactly right. Yeah, that is an effect. We thought it was going to be a big effect. And we were worried about that at first. And then when we've done our simulations, it actually turns out not to be that big of an effect. And the reason is because you can modulate the dose, like I showed spatially, and you can make up for a lot of the those kind of effects by modulating. So yeah, it actually turns out not to be a huge limitation.
Okay, this question comes in from Charles, and he says he wants to thank you for your lecture today, and notes that you're currently working in collaboration with partners in India, and he wants to know if you have any plans for expanding your collaboration to the African continent, especially Nigeria, which you mentioned briefly. If not, why not? Nigeria is a large country of close to 200 million people, and he thanks you.
Yeah. Again. Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, no, the hope is this is very much sort of a pilot phase right now to make sure that we can prove that this works safely and efficiently. And this partnership happened because the manufacturer that I mentioned in Bangalore is they're very innovative, a small company that is developing new technology, and they're willing to explore new things. So that was kind of how the partnership came about, but it's not tied to that site at all. In fact, they've put machines out in other countries, and they're moving out. They've actually donated some machines as well. They donated the therapy device to Vietnam and another country. Some of this through the centralized government. So yeah, that is definitely the plan, is to expand out and try to deliver this as widely as possible.
So I think I'm going to wrap up here with one more question, and it kind of follows what you were just talking about. You started talking about it, but who's going to sell this? How does this get out in the world? What are some of the competing forces in terms of commercializing this?
Yeah, those are important questions. So there are major manufacturers that are working in this realm, as you can imagine. I mean, like I mentioned, it's been technology that's been around for 50 years. It's pretty entrenched. There are very large companies in Sweden and in the UK and from California. And yeah, so you're working in that environment. The technology that they've developed has really sort of organically grown over this time to be usable in, I would say, the high-income countries. So the translation doesn't quite work. So that there's some commercial competition going on, and it's not clear that these companies are really invested in this market. So one way this might play out is a smaller company that has that focus and alignment could come in and kind of fill that niche. So that might be one way it plays out. It might be also that after the technology is proven, then maybe it gets picked up by one of these larger vendors in some way and incorporated into the devices. It's hard to know at this point how this might play out. And as somebody in academia, what I've seen is a lot of times you'll see commercial advancements that start as an academic project and then get commercialized. And I can list lots of examples in healthcare where this has happened. And if you didn't have that incubator or sort of if you didn't have the university startup kind of part of it, it just would never get off the ground. And so that's kind of the area that I've been focusing. The longer term aspect of it is something that I'm not really involved in, but it's a very important question.
Well, I think that answers the questions that we had here today. And I want to thank everybody on behalf of the Alumni Association for tuning into this faculty forum online. And of course, thanks to Professor Ford for giving such a wonderful presentation. I want to let you know the alumni staff will be sure to forward all the questions to Dr. Ford. If there was something that I didn't address or I missed, please make sure you can go ahead and ask a few more questions and we'll get to those. You can also tweet about today's chat using the hashtag MIT Better World and send your follow-up questions or feedback to alumnilearn@mit.edu. Again, that's alumnilearn.mit.edu. And thanks again, everybody, for watching.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.